Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hit the Limit Break, the podcast that steps away from the daily news cycle to try and piece together the future of gaming by speaking to those that are crafting the puzzle pieces. My name is Tom Caswell, and I am here today with Sakana's very own Mat Piscatella. Matt, how are you doing today?
Great. I hope you're doing well as well, and hello, everybody.
Matt, if you could, we usually have like game developers on here and journalists and content creators. You're the first kind of analyst that we've had on. And so before we dive into questions, if you could just give like a very brief overview of your role, what Sakana is, all that jazz.
Sure thing. Again, my name is Matt. I'm the executive director covering video games and industry advisor for Circana. You might know Circana more as the NPD Group, which it was formerly known as before it merged with IRI a couple of years ago. I've been doing this about 7 years now, and my job is to go and talk to retailers and publishers and developers when they let me, looking at some of the trends across players and sales, what's happening there. Before this, I spent about 15 years in publishing. So I started at Activision back in 2005 when it was Activision Publishing. Eventually made my way to Warner Brothers Games, left there as the vice president of sales planning. So touched everything with a number: green light forecasting, sales planning, demand planning, business intelligence. If you've ever said, hey, they made that game $60, or hey, they're dropping the price of that game, I was they. That's kind of what I did. So
Gotcha.
did that for a long time, and now I get to chat with people about what's going on, kind of in a way like you mentioned. People don't talk a lot about the publishing side and more the business side of things.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting. Obviously, I think also you've kind of become a key figure in, recent years with the fact that the gaming industry is going through what it's going through and everyone is striving to, try and seek answers and, obviously a very complicated situation. And we're going to dive into all of it on this show. But before we get to kind of specific questions for you, we have 5 questions that we ask every guest that comes on this show. You are no different, obviously. So my first question is, you've been in the industry a long time. What is the biggest non-obvious difference between now and when you first joined the industry?
Well, I don't know how non-obvious it is, but it's the digital revolution
Mm.
and its impact it's had across the board. Back in the day, 2005 and earlier, everything was on a disc, basically. I mean, this was the very early days of Steam. Mobile were very limited selections. This was well before the era of the App Store. And so any game one would play would come on a disc, be bought in a store. And everything about the business revolved around that path. Now there are so many ways to access games and content, so many different platforms on which they could be played. And the ways that people relate with gaming are just beyond anyone's imagination back even 20 years ago. And you can even imagine 20 years from now. So that's had a trickle down effect on everything, and related to that, the democratization of publishing rather than, developers having to rely on one big publisher to print the game, sell it to retail, get it on shelves. Now, anyone can publish a game, and that's really led to a lot of opportunity, but also a lot of challenges.
Right.
But yeah, that's the biggest one, the digitalization of the gaming industry. I mean, even if you compare to 2012, just not that long ago, you were talking about 2% of content being sold digitally, and now we're, the vast majority of content is sold digitally. So it's been a wild ride that people really, I don't think, have really appreciated as much in terms of what that's actually meant to the business and their own play.
Yeah, I remember I was definitely buying games back in like the 2012 era, but the first big one where it was like, I felt like the domino had dropped for me was The Last of Us. The Last of Us, I think it was their first game that they published, like they allowed you to download onto the PlayStation 3. And I remember like everyone was like trying to figure out when it was going to go live, because it wasn't this kind of like it's at midnight, right? Like each publisher does it a bit differently, right? Like some people drop it midnight Eastern or 3 a.m. Eastern sometimes, different times. Back then it was like no one knew what to expect. And the fact is like most of everything that I get now gaming wise is almost all digital. So yeah, it's been very fast.
Yeah,
For
and even if you look
sure to be
back to like
said.
the origin of Steam,
Mm,
there was tremendous pushback on that. They positioned it as a way to keep the games updated, regularly, but people wanted to hold on to their discs. And now, of course, the PC market's 99.9%
yeah,
digital, and a lot of that's going through Steam. So that's not that long ago,
yeah.
but it's been forever. Yeah,
It's simultaneously not been that long, but also forever.
kind of like this month.
Matt, if you weren't in gaming, professionally, personally, what does your life look like?
Well, I'd always wanted to be in gaming. I never thought I'd actually have the chance to do it. I was on a pre-law track. Would probably have gone into the law. If I had been born 10 years later, I probably would have gotten very much involved in the early baseball analytics revolution, the whole Moneyball era.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
sure I would have been right in that mix, but by the time that was all happening, I was already in gaming and trying to make it there. So that's probably where I would have been. Baseball and video games have been basically all I've loved my whole life, and so I'm sure one of those two things would have happened, or I would have made happen in some way, and thankfully it did. So hey, pretty good. I'll take it. Not too bad. Better than being a lawyer, I guess.
I love the idea of in an alternate universe, someone is playing you in the movie Moneyball. Okay, cool. Obviously, not only do you cover games, but you play games as well. Is there anything that you've played recently, or handful of games that you can point to that you think are indicative of where gaming is going?
Well, from looking at it from a business perspective, right? Because that's kind of where I live, and I'm sure developers they see that long road ahead of where development could go far better than I could. But when looking at the business itself and the future of where that's going, I mean, it looks a lot similar to what it does right now.
Mm,
And what we're seeing right now are the big live service behemoths, the Fortnite, Minecraft, Roblox, Grand Theft Auto, and Call of Duties of the world. They have a very strong hold on player engagement, time, dollars, and they're becoming, they have their own gravity in pulling people in, and what I'm seeing over the next 5 to 10 years of more is more of that.
mm,
And I don't know what's going to be able to break us from that cycle, just because these games are so deep and people have such deep social hooks with the games, and they've
yeah,
already spent a great deal of time and money. So they're heavily invested.
yeah.
And how you get folks to say, you know what, I'm not going to jump on Fortnite with my friends. I'm going to go play this other single player game that I don't really know if I'm going to like or not. That's been a real big challenge. And that's kind of what I see continuing to happen. Of course, trying to predict what's going to happen in this industry is always a fool's errand.
Mm.
If you ask someone in 2003 what would happen in 5 years, they probably would not have said that Guitar Hero and Rock Band would be the biggest things in the world, and something called a Wii would be a cultural phenomenon. But that's kind of what happened. So hey, at least for the time being, these big live service games are probably here to stay until they're not. And what's going to cause that to happen? Man, if I knew, I'd be out making it. But we'll see.
You'd leave Sakana to go make
In
Fortnite,
a
the Fortnite
heartbeat, I'd be
killer.
out making that game because then I'd be retired on an island. You'd never see me again.
Yeah, go watch as much baseball as you'd like.
Oh,
Um,
the dream.
the dream. Okay. So aside from recent games, is there any game that you have played in your life that if you could, Eternal Sunshine, Spotless Mind, Machine, wipe your memory of it so you could experience it fresh?
I think it'd be The Witcher 3. I got
Ooh.
really into The Witcher 3. I went and collected everything off the floor of that sea. Up in the north, I forgot what the sea was called, but I spent days just like looking for rocks to find the tiniest collectible to do everything in that game. So probably that one. I really loved The Witcher 3. You know, it holds up today
It does.
exceptionally well. Throw that in the mix any day. But yeah, that's the game that I kind of really got into, and probably wouldn't mind trying it again from scratch. Maybe I'll do it anyway. I don't know. But yeah, it was great.
So would you say then that the Witcher 4 is one of your most anticipated titles that you're looking forward to?
Yes, but I always try to keep very low expectations.
Fair enough.
So
Yes.
we'll see what happens. I'm certainly, not going to expect to fall as in love with it as I did the third, but hey, if I am, that's great. Bonus. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I mean, that team has done some amazing things. Even when they stumble,
Hmm.
they end up delivering something great in the end. So, if you're going to have confidence in any team, that's as good as any.
Now, obviously, the last couple of years of the in the industry have been very tough, both in games media, games publishing, development. Um, do you believe that this has been the most tumultuous time in the industry, in the last few years? And do you think the worst of it is behind us, or there's still a lot more, for lack of a better word, pain to come?
Well, I mean, if you look at just the chaos that ensued, I mean, you're still looking at the 83 era, the big crash as being the most tumultuous, but the stakes are so much higher now.
Mm,
And what we're seeing now is impacting so many more people than it did way back in the early 80s, because gaming has become such a big part of the mass market. You have just about 3 out of every 4 people in the US play video games of some kind. We have far more developers than we've ever had before. We have far more games coming out than we ever have before. While we're also seeing this concentration and centralization of engagement in those big live service games, and of course on the mobile side, the same things are happening with the biggest games kind of having a gravity of their own. So yeah, what we're seeing right now are limits, right? And what we're also seeing is the impact of 2020 and 2021, meaning that when we had all of the stay-at-home activities associated with the pandemic come down, we had the most people playing we've ever seen before. They were playing for the most hours and they were spending the most money. We went from a market that had been a growth market for decades to a market that matured basically overnight, in that we hit ceilings in all of the territories that had a very developed gaming market going into that period. So, how do you get more people playing for more hours and spending more than they did in 2020 and 2021 without another like society altering event like
right.
what we saw in the 2021 pandemic, right? So we're seeing the impact of all of these things, rising costs as well. Like you name it, we're seeing things really impacting the space. So is it as tumultuous as the early 80s period? No, but it doesn't matter because the stakes are so much higher now.
Mm.
This is we're going through it right now, and I really feel for all the developers and everyone from publishing to retail, to people covering it in the press. It's just things are yet to shake completely out. Although I hope we're on the other side of the peak of the tumultuousness,
Hmm.
and hopefully with Grand Theft Auto 6 and Switch 2, we can start seeing a little bit of alleviation of what's been happening to folks the last couple of years. But again, it's been the 2020s have been a hell of a decade. I would like precedented times, please, both within the industry and outside the industry. But we'll see what happens.
You mentioned there GTA 6 and Switch, and one of my big questions was, yeah, like those two. Not only do you have a game that is potentially a massive console seller, a lot of people probably waiting for that game to release before they jumped into this generation. It will sell PlayStations, Xboxes, I'm sure will sell as well. And then of course you have the Switch 2, which is very interesting because from all the rumors, it seems like this thing is going to be way more capable than the first Switch. It's not going to be behind in technology wise, like the Switch One was. And there's rumors that even big AAA games that are meant to launch this year might also come there. So a potential new avenue of millions of new gamers for games that were previously kind of locked to, the two consoles or PC. If GTA 6 and the Switch 2 both hit this year, like what measurement of effect do you feel like it will have on the industry? Do you feel like it's a really big boost, or do you think that the industry is still going to struggle despite those two things coming out?
Well, if those two things do happen this year and they do meet the expectations going into this year, right? I think you're looking at low to mid single digit percentage growth in overall market spending on video game products. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but it would result in record spending on the consumer side. It would get the industry back to growth over that 2021 peak that we'd previously seen. And most importantly, I think, and a little bit of a thing not a lot of folks might be thinking about, is it gets investment flowing back into the game space. Again, we had a market that had been growing for decades, all of a sudden peak and wasn't growing anymore after 2021. And while the market's held relatively stable to those highs, it hasn't exceeded them. These are a couple of things that will help that market get back on a growth trajectory, and nothing investors love more than the line going up and to the right. And if your line's not going up and to the right as an industry, it's really tough to get those dollars flowing in, because once those dollars start flowing in, all of a sudden you have more games coming out, you have more teams supported, and then that kind of self-sustains into another growth trajectory, which is what I'm hoping to see. But yeah, when you mentioned the Switch 2 and some of the ways it might not be as far behind the curve as Switch 1 was, I mean, that's a little bit of the benefit of this diminishing returns we're seeing in improved tech. Graphics are great and they are getting better, but they're not getting better at the same exponential scale that we had been seeing, in previous years. So that's one of the benefits. The other benefit is, because of that, players are demanding and are seeing the demands met of being able to play whatever they want, wherever they want, whenever they want, with whomever they want. So, for example, if someone's playing Fortnite, I mean, their Fortnite crew is with them, whether they're playing on their phone or on their Chromebook or on their console, right? So this is the kind of thing that will also help, is when we're seeing more opportunities for people to play in more places, then that should generally mean we can start getting back on a growth trajectory, so long as the games show up and so long as people continue to remain engaged. Now, whether that means it'll raise all boats with that growing tide, or if that tide's only going to raise the biggest boats, that's the key question, particularly for the smaller and independent teams that have been struggling the last couple of years anyways.
So you mentioned the benefit of having, games anywhere on any device, cross progression, cross play, all of these things fully unlocked for a lot of experiences, which is fantastic and a very consumer friendly choice. It's also seems to be the kind of lifeline that Xbox has been looking toward for its brand, this is an Xbox strategy. Basically, any device with a heartbeat can play, they want to play the games, whether it's streaming, all this stuff. You recently said in an interview that Xbox's future, at least when it comes to its game releases, is looking bright. And this was in reference to the fact that now that Xbox owns Activision, now that it owns Bethesda, all of these games, obviously Call of Duty, Bethesda's titles, all of these things that are coming to other platforms, they're performing well. You're seeing those games in the bestseller lists every month on things like PlayStation and PC, not just on obviously Xbox, where there is a limited amount of consoles. This idea of the future looking bright for Xbox on a broader scale, do you think this strategy is like going to pay off? Do you think that they'll eventually get to a point? Because I think there was some stat that was like 2030 they want 100 million subscribers to Game Pass, which seems a very tough number to hit. But yeah, where do you think that brand is going to net out over the next few years if they continue down this path?
Yeah, I mean they've always had very aggressive Game Pass targets, but at the same time, those targets have been changing as the world's progressed. Xbox, if anything, is adaptive to what they see in terms of the changing market conditions. And Xbox has always been basically 10 years ahead of the market. If you think back to the Xbox One reveal, where they went for a very digital focused ecosystem,
Mm-hmm.
that got significant pushback from both retailers and players. But you look 10 years down the road, all of a sudden, we're in a market that's very much digital first. If you're looking at things like cloud streaming, you're looking at things like having those games available wherever you might be. 10 years from now, I have no doubt that we're all going to be playing all kinds of things on all kinds of devices. And cloud may even take some big steps forward over that time. But right now, we're still kind of in the infancy stages of these things really developing. So on a long time frame, I'm confident in their ability to adapt to the changing market conditions. Do I think they're going to hit the metrics they have for success today? Not necessarily, but those metrics are probably going to continue to change over time. One of the things they've done pretty well is start making content available wherever players are. And that's ultimately what's important. The console market in the US in terms of console hardware peaked in 2008. We have seen a flat to relatively down market in terms of console hardware spending ever since. And there's no real reason to believe that a box under the television is going to be a growth category. Not saying that it's going to necessarily decline. People want a shiny new box to play the shiny games on their shiny new TVs. And I don't think that's ever going to change. But where the growth opportunities lie are in areas like PC portable devices. They lie in the ability to bring content to other screens, so long as people know how to set up their routers and have the right internet configuration, which is a whole nother problem that they're going to have to face over the next 10 years. But the idea of bringing the content to more people in more places, I think, is very sound. And I think other folks are doing it too. They're just not being quite as obvious
Upfront.
about it and
Sure.
haven't been talking about it in quite the same way.
Do you and you think that Microsoft, the parent company, is going to give the brand the time to make that shift? Do you think?
So far, they have. Of course, that could certainly change, especially with how AI is developing for better and worse, depending on your perspective. And what happens in that space seems to be the primary focus right now. And as that goes, that could have a trickle down effect on other areas of the business. We'll have to see. But this is a very big company that's been very established in the space for a very long time. Certainly don't see them giving up anytime soon. Nor do I really see them like over investing anytime soon. But we'll have to see it. It's pretty speculative and
Mm,
will depend on a lot of things. So far, though, I'm pretty confident and optimistic in this idea of bringing content to more places. And so far, at least, it seems to be working out pretty well. Again, we'll have to see how it develops over the next couple of years. We're still kind of early days in this,
right.
especially with like something like Call of Duty just coming to Game Pass a couple of months ago.
Right.
Early days, still initial results are moderately positive. I think there's some room for optimism there. Is it hitting what they probably wanted it to hit? I don't know, but pretty good so far. We'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, this year will be particularly interesting, especially, they just had their developer direct yesterday. If all those games hit those dates, they will have more content theoretically this year than they will ever have. So yeah, it'll be very interesting, I think, after 2025 specifically to see where Xbox stands. Going to the other side of the aisle, PlayStation. PlayStation obviously doing their PlayStation thing. which a couple of years ago seemed to be a shift toward the live service, trying to find those Fortnite killers, trying to take existing IP and create new IP that would bring in that kind of consistent revenue over time. Obviously, they've hit a massive wall with that. You think of Concord. There's news that Bend and Bluepoint were both working on these live service projects that have been canceled. It's up in the air whether that Horizon game is canceled. There's rumors on both sides that it still exists, it doesn't. Needless to say, it seems that Sony is kind of getting the message that I think everyone at the time knew of, like, this is an oversaturated market. You're not going to be able to make the inroads here. And they seem to be preemptively, I mean, not necessarily preemptively because Concord did come out, but after Concord, they're like, okay, let's reevaluate this. And they seem to be making some pretty deep cuts to this strategy. Do you think that this is just what's your take, I guess, on where Sony's headed, I guess, is the general question, but specifically regarding its live service plans?
Right. The math you're doing on any development plan is our percentage of success possibility and the amount of potential return, right? So it's a two lever thing. Your risk goes higher and lower as your return potential for return goes higher and lower. And generally, the high return projects carry a high amount of risk, right? You're not generally expecting billions of dollars in profit unless you need to take some risk with the development plan that you're pursuing for a particular game. In this case, when we're talking about the live service market, tremendous return potential, bigger than anything else in the market. The problem is that the percentage of the risk of failure has gotten exceptionally high to where no matter how big the potential return might be, the likelihood of success is so low that it's starting to make that investment in that development a much more questionable decision. And you're going to see games still hit in this space. Marvel Rivals is proving that there is still potential for a game to break out and be a massive hit in this live service market. The challenge is that's one example of many other failures. And when you're talking about the scale of cost, the scale of investment to make these games work, it's just not generally a great business. Now, fortunately for Sony, PlayStation is in a dominant position in the console market right now. They're selling over half the boxes. They have a tremendously dedicated player base. Their brand affinity remains very high. The players believe in them as a company, as a development organization. And these are the kind of adjustments that just have to be made when you start looking at a market and realizing that Fortnite's Fortnite, and hey, maybe we can't be Fortnite. Maybe Fortnite is just kind of its own thing. What do we do special, different, unique that we can really take advantage of? And how do we make sure that we're meeting players where they want us to meet them and delivering the kinds of experiences that'll get folks in and spending their time and dollars in our products. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing is that realization across the market that hey, Fortnite's making a lot of money. Roblox is making a lot of money. Really tough to be Fortnite or Roblox. Where else can we play? Where else can we find an opportunity in the market?
Do you think that Sony will kind of retreat back to the safety of just doing the thing that they were doing up until kind of this live service push of we're just going to create these really solid single player action adventure experiences? Or do you think they're going to have to look toward an Xbox like strategy of day and date on PC? Obviously there's rumors that they're working on a handheld themselves. Do you see them just going to the safety of what they knew, or do you think they'll continue to kind of experiment with new paths forward?
I think what we're going to see generally, and not just in Sony's case, but you look across third-party publishers as well, is trying to find a way to put a bigger focus on the things that they do very well. So I would assume or anticipate we'd start seeing a little bit of a pullback from the live service push more into a hybrid approach of more content that could be story based but has some elements of live service support built in. Ways to kind of bridge the gap between having a game like a story based game that is a flash in the pan, it might hit for a month or two and then disappear, to games that can be sustained over time. Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is a great example of a game that's, it has some very light elements in there, costume support over time, some updates and additions, but generally it's the same game, but it still remains among the best sellers every month. Hogwarts Legacy, another example of a game that's really held in terms of sales and player engagement, even though it's not a big live service title. And so I think we're going to start seeing a little bit more focus on that type of development rather than trying to chase Fortnite, which you're not going to be able to do. The other thing you mentioned is bringing up a handheld. I think this is one of the areas that's going to be very interesting to watch over the next 5 years. These types of hybrid devices, the switchification of the market. We've already seen it happen with PC portables, whether that's the Steam Deck or the Asus ROG Ally or any of the other billion PC gaming portables hitting the market. It wouldn't surprise me at all if the next PlayStations or Xboxes had a similar approach, allowing player choice, which is really the key thing kind of driving everything right now.
I mean, do you foresee then potentially the PlayStation 6 being a hybrid device, or do you see it being a box and then there's there's a portable version kind of separate from that, or do you think they have to go all in and it's just the one thing?
I think it would. So completely speculative. I know nothing about it. Have no idea. If I did know, I'd be under an NDA. Wouldn't be able to talk about it anyway.
Of course.
I think that you have to look at that hybrid model, especially with where tech is now, where tech might be in a couple of years. Try to really streamline the manufacturing process. Really try to bring a product that can have the biggest reach across the most folks. Now, whether they'll do that or not, who knows? I'd be surprised if we had a box for the TV and a portable version, but hey, who knows? We could. But I definitely think we're going to see some more creativity. I mean, you look at the console market, and honestly, it's boring. Between the big two, the green and the blue, we haven't seen a huge amount of innovation since motion control showed up in terms of the consoles themselves. And maybe it's time we start seeing a little bit more innovation, especially as younger consumers are choosing PC and mobile more now than they had been in the past. So I think we're going to have to really see some new things, some new ideas coming to these console platforms if they want to continue to be where they are, say, in 10 years from now.
So, you mentioned mobile. There's something that I've been relatively bullish on myself personally, although I don't have the expertise or like the data that you do. And so I'm curious to pick your brain on this. So the mobile market obviously accounts for so much consumer spending in gaming. I think it's around half of all consumer spending is spent in the mobile market. Obviously, originally that was very small experiences, and then around the turn of the 2020s, you have things like HoYoverse come along, and they're making a more traditional AAA experience with the phone in mind, but it is obviously coming to PC, PlayStation, other platforms. And then following that, building off on top of that, Apple comes out, they say, hey, we have these chips that can now run console ports of modern games. The Resident Evil franchise, all those remakes, they're now on your phone. Assassin's Creed's, iPad, iPhone. Now, the sales numbers for those experiences have been relatively low so far. I think in the tens of thousands for some of them at best. And I think there's a lot of skepticism, maybe rightfully so, of phones replacing consoles, being the all-in-one experience that has the, you still have your Candy Crush or what have you, your Marvel Snap, your Pokemon Pocket, but you can also have, the latest and greatest in AAA gaming. Where do you foresee that side of mobile going? And do you think that developers should be worried about low sales numbers right now, or do you think those will increase? And then also, is there a problem with the, I guess, the habits of mobile players, right? Are they simply just trained to expect free to play with microtransactions, and they're not going to shell out 60 dollars for a game? So just in general, what does that look like a few years from now?
So at the top level, right, when we're talking about mobile, we are talking about a little bit different of a player base than you would see on console or PC. A lot of the audience here, they jump in, they jump out. We call them daily dabblers or incidental players,
I
where
love
they
that.
might fire up a game for a little bit while they're in a commercial for a TV show, or they might play something on the can. You know what I mean? Like, let's just be real. That's kind of what they're doing. That's a big chunk of that gaming audience, right? And that audience in particular is going to want Candy Crushes, and that's all they're going to want. And in fact, what we've seen in the mobile market is a entrenchification like we have in the console space, where the biggest games are the biggest games, and they've been that way for seemingly ever. You look at the charts that Sensor Tower, who we partner with on tracking the mobile market, put out, and it's the same games every single month, just like we see on the top of the console charts. Now, for the portion of that audience that is interested in more than just Candy Crush, and there's a significant portion of them, of those folks. In fact, the majority of people that play on console also play on mobile. The real key there, though, is developing experiences that work for that mobile device. Now, that can be done with big AAA games. Fortnite and Call of Duty have both done it very effectively. But just doing a straight port isn't the way to go. You really have to customize that experience for the mobile play pattern. And then you have to get real lucky on the way. And you also have to price it in a way that's very different than how things might be priced on PC or console. Now, if you look longer term, you look 20 years down the road,
Mm.
are we going to be at a point where a mobile device is powerful enough that it can be docked like a Switch is today and play not only mobile devices, or have a Steam or a PlayStation app or an Xbox app or even a Nintendo app that you can play your console library on your phone, or your console like library on your phone hooked up to a television? We could get there. I think it's going to be a while. And so I certainly wouldn't be worried about it now. But when you look at the long term potential of where this industry might go, convenience is king. It's been king for a long time. It'll become even more important. And if we do get to the point where the tech is advanced enough in a mobile device where that can happen, I don't see why it wouldn't. But again, we're probably looking after I'm long gone, so we'll see what happens there. Enjoy it. But that's kind of where I see things going. So for right now, it's all about delivering experiences that are tailored for that device, even though they could be the same types of experiences played on other platforms, but just kind of customized for the play pattern and how people will actually use the devices.
Do you think developers, like, for example, do you think Capcom is looking at the sales numbers of its Resident Evil ports on iPhone and is like, oh man, like we thought there'd be money in these sales, but there isn't? Or is it meeting their expectations of, no, we kind of felt like it would do these kind of numbers?
Well, I mean, I can't really speak specifics. I think my assumption, if I were in their shoes, say if I was still at Warner or whatever, and we were doing something similar, um, my assumption would be that it was a test. Like, hey, let's just see what happens. Let's fund this development. It couldn't have been too expensive. I mean, I really don't know, but I can't imagine it would have been a really significant investment to do that kind of port. I could be completely wrong. But it's sure as heck worth a test just to see what would happen. And then you learn from that, you iterate, you build, you change what you might do otherwise. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's my assumption, is that, this probably isn't breaking any P&Ls, but there's sure a lot to learn from it in terms of what to do next. And, as you learn, you build a better you build a better relationship with that consumer, and all of a sudden you're producing products that really are ahead of the curve where everyone else is going to be. And I think that's kind of what the goal was there, but again, don't know for sure, but that would be my assumption.
Okay, interesting. Another kind of curveball, let's say, in the gaming industry. And I think this is one that's been growing over the last few years substantially, is early access. One of my past guests, Andrea Renee, her answer to the question of a game that she thinks is indicative of the future was Hades 2, and showing a game that, is really showing how to get the most out of the early access model. And I also then mentioned to her, I was like, what's really funny is like, not only are more games releasing in early access, but more games that aren't releasing in early access seem to be releasing in early access. At the Game Awards, Matt, Ubisoft had the balls to put out a trailer for Star Wars Outlaws, and it had all new gameplay across the screen 3 months after they've already like fully released the title. Do you think that early access is going to like continue to kind of snowball in this way, and we're actually going to end up seeing maybe the majority of games being early access? And like, what are the advantages, disadvantages to that?
Well, the temptation to do this is high, right? Because you can start generating revenue from your product before it's actually as complete as you would have had it be before things like updating was able to be done. For publishers and developers that have, a strong bond of trust with their consumer base, say the Hades team, which has a very strong relationship with their audience. The audience trusts them, and they do right by their audience. Something like early access makes a ton of sense. The players understand the relationship. They say, hey, this is early access. This is going to change. I understand that. I'm fine with it. Other publishers and developers may not be coming to the market with the same level of honesty and trust, and may just want to start generating revenue from a title that's not complete and honestly may never be complete. So we have some growing pains to work through. We have some things to learn, and the more consumers get burned by titles that go to early access in a way that isn't what they expect, the less likely they'll be to react positively to games in this process. And that could be very painful for some of those games. I think it's gotten a little out of hand personally.
Mm.
I think that if you're putting a product up for sale, you should have faith in that product working the way it should, and be exceptionally clear about which ways it isn't or might change over time. And we're not seeing that all the time. We're not seeing honesty and transparency the way we probably should be. The developers that are doing it the right way, I think, is perfectly fine. The folks that are just trying to get a leg up on early sales, I don't like that, but it's part of the way of the business right now. Caveat emptor, man. Like, people have to know what they're buying and be okay with it. Unfortunately, sometimes people get burned, which isn't great.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, it's definitely a tricky situation. I'm very curious as to see where it goes. Okay, let's see here. Let's talk GTA 6. Everyone wants to talk about GTA 6. Do you I was going over we were going over the numbers of the top 20, the numbers you guys put out, top 20 games last year. I think GTA 5 was 15. A dozen years after it had come out on other platforms, it's the 15th best-selling game, which is nuts to think about. Obviously, it's now been ported to once again to another new generation of consoles. GTA 6 is going to be huge. There's no doubt about that. Is it going to be GTA 5 big? That's, I think, the question, and I'm curious as to what your thoughts are.
At launch, absolutely. I expect this to be the biggest entertainment launch of our lifetimes. What happens after that? A great question. Now, I think like the biggest challenge is that very embedded and dedicated Grand Theft Auto 5 player base. How do you transition them over into 6? And I'm sure they have spent considerable time working out this problem and have it figured out. Because that's, I think, the biggest competitor to 6 is going to be 5.
That makes sense.
And how you make that transition. Grand Theft Auto 5 is the best selling video game in U.S. history in terms of dollar sales. Nothing's even close. Like you mentioned, it continues to chart every single month, every single year, and the position you quoted doesn't even include October, November, and December digital sales for Grand Theft Auto 5. There's a 12-week delay on Take-Two digital data coming into those charts. So, that's
Wow.
it could even be a little
It
bit
could be
higher than
higher.
15
Yeah. It might
at
even
the end of
break
the
top
day,
10. Yeah.
but it's been there every year since 2013, right? Like it is the biggest and probably most important video game, at least of the modern era. Um, and it's not even close. So how they transition that audience over is going to be very interesting. And what impact that's going to have on the Fortnite, Minecraft, Robloxes, and Call of Duty of the world is also going to be very interesting, because although you might say, well, Roblox is a kid's game, there's a lot of kids playing Grand Theft Auto, you know what I'm saying? So we'll have to see how that changes the marketplace as well. But you can kind of see like every other publisher kind of getting out of the way of
Right.
where they think that thing might drop, because it's going to be absolutely massive. It'll sell boxes. It'll get people back into the console and PC ecosystems, even if they step back for a little bit. And hopefully, again, that's one of those things that helps generate enthusiasm, excitement with the investment community to start funding more games getting developed. But yeah, how do you follow up the biggest thing ever? And how do you do that effectively? It's a good problem to have, I guess, but still quite a challenge to try to figure out how to do that effectively.
Yeah, it's really funny with the developer direct, the Xbox developer direct yesterday. All of those dates were like less than 3 months away. It was like April 8th, May 15th. I think Doom was the furthest thing out. Obviously, Ninja Gaiden in the fall, Ninja Gaiden 4. But I was looking at those dates and I was like, well, they know it's not coming out in April, so they're gonna put South of Midnight out here. Like, they're not taking a risk. It is really fascinating, and I'm really curious to see what happens when Rockstar does announce that date, whether that is this year or they end up pushing it. What the everyone's inboxes are going to be full of emails. What is in those emails? I don't know, but we're all going to get a lot more emails, including you, Matt.
Yeah, I had the same thought watching that yesterday. I'm like, all right, this is going to be April. Okay, yep,
Yep.
this ain't going to be July. This ain't going
Yeah,
to be
they're not
September.
they're not going to risk even getting close to anything.
We'll just wait. Yeah, we'll wait and see what happens. And you know what? There's all kinds of smoke on that too. Whether it's when it's going to show up. I know people are saying that it might not show. I don't know. I sure hope it shows up, because we kind of need it in the market.
Yeah.
But we'll see. But yeah, people are going to be real careful about that, because it's going to be real tough. Like, don't drop your indie game on that date. That's for dang sure.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But we'll see.
Matt, final question here. We've talked about a lot of aspects of the industry, but is there anything big that you think analysts, the media, developers, and publishers themselves, is there anything you think that we're missing that is like no one's talking about it? It's not getting the kind of eyeballs that it needs in order, and something that I guess is an integral part of the industry that is consistently kind of looked over? Or do you think that it really is just like COVID fucked us all in so many ways?
I think what we're missing is the opportunity in areas of the world that have not had as developed a gaming market leading up to now. The opportunity, and there's only even in the research world, there's only a couple of folks tracking some of these territories, but there are significant opportunities in other parts of the world that we generally don't think about. We don't think about on the publisher side as much as we should. We don't think about on the research side. We don't think about on the media side. China, Brazil, India, some of these territories that are big and continuing to grow, that's where the real global opportunity for growth lies. And that's, what's going to help continue to fuel development in parts of the world that have a more developed video game market. The other thing that people probably aren't thinking enough about, although people are thinking about it quite a bit, is the PC portable space. I think this has a chance to be disruptive. One of the things that's really holding, I think, that market back a little bit is Windows. If a more consumer friendly, a more friendly way of accessing content on that type of device for a Windows based device exists, all of a sudden that market opens up quite a bit.
Yeah.
It's not the size of opportunity like some of these other territories are in terms of market development, but it sure is an opportunity area, I think, for the developed markets to really try to grow that PC side and that more accessible side, especially with some of the younger audiences that are more, some younger players think of PC as like the cool kids platform, and consoles are for olds, just like millennials thought consoles were cooler for young people and PCs were for olds. That's kind of flipped in a big way. But yeah, there's an opportunity there, I think, for this market in particular on that PC portable side, if we can make it a little bit easier for folks to play them.
Yeah, Microsoft, if you're listening, please, I'm desperate for my ROG Ally to be more usable on the Windows front.
Seriously.
And I know that there's been some research and some, I think I even saw like a leaked demo of like what Windows 11 could look like on, what some team pitched. Cool. Well, Matt, thank you. That's so much insight. I can't, I think about this stuff daily, but obviously you're operating at a level where it literally is the meme from The Hangover with all the numbers and everything. Mix in the baseball stats as well, and it's just an inordinate amount of data. Thank you for your work, and yeah, everyone, go check out. Matt is all over the place. Interviews, and then obviously posting data. Where can people find you on the internet if they want to follow you?
Yeah, I'm on the Blue Skies, Mat Piscatella with 1T. Kind of like a doormat, hang out. It'd be cool, it'd be groovy. I chat about video games a lot. Just try to add color and data when I can. Yeah, you can talk video games anytime. I always love chatting with folks.
Well, I love chatting with you, Matt. Have a great rest of your day. And for everyone else, we'll see you next time.